How are you doing? Welcome back. So firstly, thank you for having me. It's great to be back here in Prague. It's my third visit here now. So a few familiar faces, and apologies that I don't speak Czech, and if I'm speaking too fast or you don't understand, please just wave at me or make some kind of signal and I'll try and slow it down. But for those of you I've not met before, my name is Nick Butcher. I am a member of the Android Developer Relations team. So our team is part of the Android engineering team. We're all engineers at heart, very technical. But our job is to work with you guys to help you make the best possible Android apps you can. So we can help you with technical issues, design issues, and so on. So I'm very focused on UI and UX. So that's my area of specialities. So I'm going to talk today about how to create modern-looking Android applications, which not only look great, but function great and work across a range of devices. Now, I always think it's funny when you start talking about Android and UI. For the longest time, it was kind of the Wild West. It was kind of anything goes, right? There was no guidelines. You could just do what you want. Quite often, if you were building an app, someone would just hand you some design mocks, and they would look a lot like a certain fruity product, and you'd just have to spend a lot of time and effort trying to make it because you didn't know any better. And then along came probably one of my favorite sites on the internet, developer.android.com/design. So if you take one thing away from this, this talk, hopefully remember this URL. Has everyone seen this page before? Has everyone read it all the way through, every single page? A couple of people, good, good. You should. It's not very long. You can probably do it in about 1 or 2 hours, depending on how fast you go through it. And it's well worth it. And so now, when a designer comes and says, build this application, you can say, no, this is wrong. It should look like this, and Google says so. And if they push back, then send them to me. Right, so designing for Android. I'd like to step back a little bit before I dive into Android specifics and talk about designing for mobile in general, because I think it's really key to keep some of these constructs in your mind when you think about designing for Android. First thing is, most Android devices out there are touch devices, right? You're doing direct manipulation of the UI. Not like indirect manipulation, like a keyboard or mouse, where you're doing something over here and something over here changes. You're touching something and manipulating something, and it kind of keys into how we as humans interact with the world, where we pick up things and we see things change. So that direct manipulation is really important to think about that. The other thing to bear in mind is the context of mobile. It's very different to like a PC context or a web context that other people might have designed for in the past. You're often on the go, which means kind of snacking behaviors. You're kind of coming in and out. When we're designing our apps, it's very nice to think that the user's whole attention is kind of devoted to our application. They're doing nothing else, but that's just not true. You have to design so that your information is very quick to kind of pick up, very easy to kind of jump in and out and understand very, very quickly. It's super key to do that. And you can't rely on things like network connectivity. Networks go up and down, you go underground, so you need to design for these kind of mobile specific circumstances. And the last one is one of Android's biggest strengths and also biggest challenges is the heterogeneity of devices. So whether or not you thought about it or not, you're shipping an application which is going to run on like tiny little devices all the way up to bigger tablets and TVs and whatnot. And whoever knows what else is going to come. So it really, really helps to think about that from the start, to think how your designs are going to scale or stretch, how they're going to work on different kind of hardware, different kind of inputs, different sensors, and as well as different and new OS devices. And I've just pulled out some of the key principles which we have on our design guidelines website, which I think are really, really helpful for me when I'm designing for mobile. Pictures are faster than words. So this goes back to what I was saying, when you're on mobile, you might be on the go, you might not have the user's full attention. You want your users to be able to kind of like parse your screen, your user interface super quickly, instantly understand what it is conveying to them, what the hierarchy of the information is, what's important, what I can interact with, what I can't. Using pictures will speed this up like no end. Only show me what I need when I need it. Like these devices, these computers in our pockets are supposed to make us more powerful. As programmers, we kind of think like a command line interface is pretty awesome, right? Like it's super powerful. You can do so much for it as long as you kind of like know what you're doing. But this is kind of the opposite of designing for mobile, where you don't want to overload the users with too much kind of functionality. You want to give them like optimize for the most common use cases. Make important things fast. I can't stress this too much. Like it doesn't actually have to operate fast. Like as programmers, we quite often like to think about, caching and all that kind of like making things actually fast. But when you think about design, it's almost like tricks. It's like making an operation feel fast, even if it isn't faster. So maybe you start uploading a photo earlier in the process, or you actually just change the state of the UI and then queue it and make sure the operation happens later. But it makes the user feel like an operation is happening faster. And the last one here is do the heavy lifting for me. Like, this really comes down to like simplification. Like you want to make your application do as much for you as you can. This is like sensible defaults. This is like removing options wherever you can. So these are some of my favorite of the key principles from our website that I want you to kind of bear in mind as we go through this talk. So as I said, there was a Wild Wild West for a while, and then come January of this year, we released our Android design guidelines, and hopefully, you all read it and took it to heart. And they've been out there for like 10 months, 11 months now, and I've started to see a huge change. Like the quality of the applications in the Play Store, the consistency is coming on like no end. But there's still a few of the recommendations of those guidelines which I see many application developers not really paying enough attention to, and so I want to call out 4 particular of these that I think are super important. First being the action bar. So hopefully you're all familiar. It's this horizontal bar at the top of your application. So here on a phone, it allows you to show some branding as well as do some navigation, show you some common actions you can perform from this view, and has this overflow affordance to allow you to do less common actions. The design guideline goes further and calls it arguably the most important structural element of an Android app. The most important structural element of an Android app. This is like the anchor of your view. This is when a user opens your application, they kind of like looking for something familiar to tell them how they can use your application, what is available from this screen, and this is super critical. This is where they're going to look, to the top of their app, top of your app. So my takeaway from this is just use it. So many applications out there, kind of like rolling their own, which doesn't quite look the same as the action bar, doesn't quite function the same. So many applications I see, they're kind of like, it looks a bit like the action bar, but the height's a little bit different, and it's got like dividers between some of the action items like ours don't. I'd say just any of those things, anything where your action bar is slightly different than the platform standard is going to cause a road bump in the user's mental model. They're going to be like, hang on, this isn't quite right. Is this going to function how I think it's going to function? Is it going to work the way I expect it to work? And it's that kind of thing we need to try and avoid to make your app really super easy to understand and parse. So my advice at this point is just use it if you're on the later versions of it in the platform, and Action Bar Sherlock is fantastic if you're on older platforms. We're at the state now that we have kind of enough support that there's no excuse really for not really using an Action Bar, or not using the native one if you're using one. So that's my first tip. The second one is touch feedback. Every single thing that reacts in your interface, that is interactive, you can do something with in your interface, should react when you touch it. It sounds simple, right? But so many applications I use or I run through, kind of touching list items and there's no touch highlight, or you're swiping and there's no kind of like the force field glow or something to indicate something's happening. Everything you kind of that responds to you should be like that is interactive should respond to you. We've got some great ways of doing it in the platform. You have these like stateless drawables, right? So you can easily set these. You can use the selectable item state, which comes in the support library, which is selectable item background, which gives you like a default highlight for everything. It's just inexcusable not to use this. This is going to help your application to feel like responsive. It doesn't mean something's going to happen quicker. It might not load your database any quicker, queries any quicker, but your application will feel more responsive to your users. Next up is metrics and grids, which is like a fancy designer way of saying line stuff up. It took me a while to realize that, but using some certain kind of heuristics, we've worked out that a 48 dp rhythm works incredibly well on Android. And what that comes down to is, you know, devices scale big and small, whatever, but like hands don't, right? The average human finger pad is like 7 millimeters across, and 48 dp is like slightly larger than that. So nothing that's interactive, nothing clickable, should ever be smaller than 48 dp. So we've used that as the baseline metric for our grid system, and said that, you know, if you use that, you can create these interfaces which are easy to click on, and they have this repeatable pattern, so they become easier to parse. Lining stuff up like really helps in making your user interface really quick to understand. So if you come, quite often I'll come into a screen and I'll look at it, and there'll be some text will be kind of like, you know, 4 pixels offset to one side, or a button doesn't quite line up with a text label above it. And what that does is it takes it longer, as whenever I look at the interface, for you to understand what it does. When you have these things all lined up, all of a sudden it's much quicker to kind of parse it and understand. So yeah, use these standard grids. And my next one is one of my favorite kind of tips, which has been around since Android 1.0, is using appropriate input types. So entering data on the go is pretty terrible, right? You know, we have some fancy keyboards and voice dictation, but generally it's not a great situation. Anything you can do to help your users to enter data into your application, you know, it's a no-brainer, you really should. So setting the appropriate input type hints the system what kind of input a field expects, so it can show things like appropriate keyboards and so on. So here I'm showing examples of a number keyboard, or saying if you're expecting an email address, it makes the @ sign and so on immediately available. But it goes beyond just the right type of keyboard. You can also hint at things like, here's a text cap words, which means, you know, if you're entering something like a person's name, you can help them out so they don't have to hunt around for the shift key to go into uppercase. Like, doing these things make your application so much smoother to use. And it's as simple as setting this input type. Check the docs for it. So making it easier to enter data is one thing. Like, one of my personal favorites, the easiest thing to enter is nothing, right? So there's your Android phone already knows so much about you. So many applications you use, the first thing you do when you load it up, it asks you to input like a username and a password, right? That's already, you know, you've got the user to install your app, that's half the battle, right? Then you've got like, what, a couple of minutes, 30 seconds to try and impress them that they should keep the app before they're going to uninstall it or give you a low rating or something like that. Like, one of the worst things you can do is like throw up a kind of a login button, like that's the first thing that the user does. Because worst of all, your phone probably already knows your email address, right? You've probably already entered it into Gmail or some such. So you can query the account manager and ask for a list of email addresses and let the user kind of pick it from a list rather than have to try and tap it out on a phone, which is pretty hard. It'll cost you a permission to get accounts permission, but in my opinion, it's worth it for the ease of entry. Same for passwords. Is it really super important that the user enters a password? Could you offer to generate them one? Just some random string, let them change it a few times so they can be sure you're not kind of sniffing it. They can always reset it later if they really want to set it to something specific. But just anything you can do to speed up that first time of use will really help. Better yet, just show some content and defer the log on until the last possible moment. So those are the 4 things I see, like, you know, quite common basics lined out in our guidelines and our dev site, not being done enough. The next section of this talk, I kind of want to talk about some UI techniques, which I kind of think of as like mindsets you need to be in for developing great Android apps. So the first one is to embrace the Holo theme. So Android has a distinct look and feel now, right? Holo is Android's look and feel. It's quite a minimal look and feel. There isn't lots of kind of lickable UI with gradients and drop shadows and so on, and that's on purpose. We haven't just chosen this kind of sleek, modern aesthetic for no reason. If you look at some of these standard controls in the toolkit here, you can see things like the buttons are very kind of minimal. Text boxes are just kind of like a line with just like a little moustache at the end. We do this for a reason. Using the Holo look and feel will help you to build an application which scales to different devices. Like, this is like the main reason why we chose a look and feel, an aesthetic like this, is because Android scales across devices. So if you think about it, if you had a very kind of rich graphical interface, you end up having to create lots and lots of different assets for different resolutions, different sizes, different aspect ratios. by using the Holo look and feel, which relies on content and repeated patterns and typography and so on to give structure rather than lots of rich graphical assets, it allows you to create a layout which is going to scale gracefully across different size devices. So embrace Holo. Like I say, emphasize content over Chrome. Like, don't have lots of bounding boxes and structural elements. Let your content rise up to the front. So if we look at here from the dialer, for example, in the call log, you have the kind of like borderless buttons, which just use these kind of subtle dividers to delineate between interactive items. It's getting rid of all the kind of Chrome that you don't need and just letting the content float to the top. So Holo comes in a couple of flavors to start with. So on the left you have like the dark theme, or on the right the light theme. Or you can go somewhere in the middle and have a light theme with dark action bar. So these are kind of like the starting points for which you know not every app has to look the same. And yeah, that's how you set them. But I would argue that the Holo kind of like themes are just your starting point. Your job as a developer is to take the kind of Holo starting points and like marry it to your app's look and feel, so your branding. So if you look at something like the YouTube application, for example, it takes like the dark Holo theme and it marries it with YouTube's kind of like red and white custom branding. And so you can use those accent colors and so on to kind of completely customize the way Holo looks. Not every Holo application has to look exactly the same. It'll look like it's from the Holo family, it'll look like an Android application, but it's your job to marry it with your company's branding to get something which is unique. To help you do that, I wanted to give a shout out to a couple of awesome community tools. Don't worry about writing these URLs down, I'll share this presentation at the end. But yeah, Android Holo Colors is superb. You kind of put in your accent colors and it'll download all your drawables, all your XMLs, all your style files that you need to kind of customize the default Holo controls to match with your look and feel. So if you have like a pink accent color with your branding, it'll download all the standard spinners and buttons and whatnot in that same pink highlight that you need, and you just drop those into your project and you're away. And the second link there by Jeff Gilfit, that does the same thing for the action bar. So I'd love to see us build this into our own tooling at some point, but until then, these are fantastic community tools, and I thank the authors for it. And as a subset of talking about Holo, is using typography. So Android uses typography very, very strongly to give structure. Like I said, it's all about getting rid of all that kind of unnecessary chrome and cruft around your content and letting the kind of content like stand forth. So using different typography styles, you can give your application structure and emphasis. So by default, as of Jelly Bean, we ship with Roboto font in the regular, the light, and the condensed weights, each with kind of bold and italic versions thereof. So using these different kind of typographical treatments, you can give your application structure. So if you look at some of the standard kind of like title bars, they'll often be like the small text appearance with like block capitals. If you have like a title for a page, it works really, really well to use the Roboto Light font in a larger size. Like using these different textual treatments, you can get rid of a lot of structural elements and have a much cleaner look. So that was Holo. The next one to think about is device variety. Like, this is just from one manufacturer. I made this slide a little while ago, but there's no getting away from the fact that there are just a huge number of size and shape devices out there. I mean, it's one of the reasons we love Android for the choice, right? But it can be a challenge to design for. And I think we have to learn from the web community how they're adapting to it in the websites. And the answer to dealing with this variety is responsive design. There's only so much you can do by building like a phone app or a tablet app. That doesn't really deal with the flexibility, the sheer range of devices out there. What we really need to do is use the principles of responsive design to make an application which puts your content first. It defines, what your content is, the logical hierarchy, and then adapts the content depending on the capabilities of the device it's running on at the time. So an example of this kind of technique, if you take a look at the Gmail application, here it is running on a phone and a tablet, and it's essentially showing much the same information. Like on the left you have a list of messages, on the right it's showing the same information, but it's got so much more room. It's expanded it out and added a second column so that you see more information at once. So it's the same content, the same kind of hierarchy, but a completely different visual treatment to kind of take advantage of the capabilities of the device. A slightly more extreme example is to take a look at the YouTube application. So again, it's showing the same kind of information, a list of videos, but on the tablet device, it's kind of taking advantage of all that screen real estate to give a much richer visual treatment. So the way we build these kind of UIs is we kind of like, it's like reductionism. You kind of break it down into its individual components. So you say, you know, this is a shot from the Play Store. We say this is like a screenshot carousel, and in one treatment, it's kind of only got so much room. On another treatment, it's got a lot more room. Basically, you break them down into these little fragments, and then you tell them to render themselves depending on how much space they have. And it just works, and it puts it all back together. So again, you slice up your whole UI into like kind of these like fundamental fragments, and then you just arrange them differently depending on how much space is on the device. For one of the best kind of introductions to this topic, I'd refer you to this blog, Pushing Pixels, which has got a very, very good introduction into how you do this like on Android. So yeah, it's the same content, the same visual hierarchy, and you adapt to context. So when I say adapt to context, it basically means you define set breakpoints. You say, my content is, you know, a list of messages in this kind of hierarchy, and you can say I have different ways of showing that. I can do a list view, I could go into a grid view, I could do a free column view, something like that. But then you kind of say I have, you know, to do a two-column view, I need at least, say, 600 dips of width. So you just set a breakpoint. You say my default layout will be a list view. If I've got 600 dips of width, then I'm going to change into a grid view. And so that's actually really easy with the way that Android's framework, resources framework, does all the heavy lifting for you. So hopefully many of you are used to kind of the drawable-HDPI, drawable-MDPI qualifiers, which lets you provide different density images. But you can use a variety of different qualifiers on all of your resources as well. So here we're using the SW qualifiers on the layout directory to provide different layouts depending on the device. So in this example I'm showing here, we have one activity called activity home in the root kind of layout directory. So that'll be the default layout which, say, a phone would receive. If this app were running on a device with at least 600 dps of width in the shortest size, say like the Nexus 7 or something like that, then it would go to the layout-SW600dp layout and get a slightly different one, which might do something different, a different treatment to the content. And then again, if you're running on a slightly larger device again, which had at least 720 dips of width in the shortest side, like say a 10-inch tablet, you can have a different layout again. So here you kind of like allow your content to just react to the capabilities of the device. This is like, you know, awesome for layouts, but you can also do things with the values files. So one of my favorite tricks is to put all of your dimensions into dimens XML. So you can put things like text sizes or image sizes, paddings, anything like that into the dimensions file. That means you don't have to create lots and lots of different layouts for different devices. You can just change those values. So for example, you might have one layout which works, you know, it's a phone layout and it works okay on a Nexus 7, but you might want it to have slightly bigger text. So rather than creating a whole new layout, you can just override the kind of the font size in a dimens file very, very simply and have a much cleaner code tree. Cool, so that was some of the kind of mindsets I want you guys to get into when you're designing your applications. And lastly, I want to share a few common UI patterns which I'm seeing kind of gain prominence in there. First one is one which comes with the SDK, which is the new rich notifications. Who here is rocking a Jelly Bean device with rich notifications? Not that many, about a third, I'd say. So once you've used these, like I hope you guys agree, they're game-changing, right? How awesome are they? You no longer have to kind of pogo stick in and out of lots of different applications. You feel so much more powerful because you can take action, or you can kind of completely, like, say, read an email or read a text message that's come in without having to leave what you're doing, without having to do like an expensive context switch. You can quickly process something, dismiss it. Yeah, I've read that, done with that. They're super awesome. Once you get used to them, like, you won't want to go back. So I'm really encouraging people to design for this and start embracing this. So it's bare essentials. You essentially get a bigger area to draw into. So instead of 64 dips, you get up to 256. You can also do some cool stuff with the priority. So we now order the notifications by the priority. So like an incoming call, for example, is going to be the most important thing. It's going to come up right at the top. But more interesting than that, I think, is using some of these minimum priorities. So something like Google Now, for example, says, I don't think the weather around where you are is like super important. I'm not going to interrupt you. But if you're in there checking your notifications, then I'll throw something up, opportunistically, so it's there, you can check it. So if you set a minimum priority notification, then we won't even bother to show a notification icon in the status bar. But if you are in there expanding your status bar, you'll see a notification in there, and you can do some really cool stuff with that. And lastly, you can set completely custom styles, so you don't have to stick to the system provided ones. So notifications that come in a few default styles. So the first is big text, which does what it says, lets you put lots of text in a notification. Next is an inbox style, so it lets you do this kind of like digest. So if you want to catch up on something, that's really, really good. And the sexy one is the big picture style. So this lets you put kind of really rich visual content right up there in your notification. It's pretty powerful. It's a pretty strong call for action. If you get a notification with this big image and it's got these two actions, you can immediately act on from there. And like I say, you don't have to stick to the built-in styles though. It's like a widget. You have this remote view, so you can draw whatever it is, continue your app's branding. So here's what Pulse are doing with their rich notification, where it looks just like Pulse, but right there in a notification. So yeah, I highly encourage you to pick up on rich notifications and add them to your application. Next one is swipe to dismiss. So this was kind of like introduced with notifications as well, and it comes down to what we were talking about before about direct manipulation UIs. So this is such a satisfying gesture to kind of actually swipe something off, and as it it disappears and it fades out as it goes, and you kind of this direct manipulation is so much more satisfying to a user to like mark a task as done or something like that. So we think this is a cool pattern, and Roman Uruk from my team has open source some code so you can easily make these like here's an example of a scroll view or a list view where you swipe the items off and it nicely closes up. So I encourage you to think about how you can use that in your app. I've shared a link to it. This isn't actually Roman's version. Jake Wharton took his code and extended it all the way back to Android 1.6, I think it is, using his 9-old Android library. So I'll share that link instead. So yeah, you can easily build this swipe to dismiss functionality into your app for really satisfying kind of interactions. With what, sorry?
When you are swiping away some objects, and you leave one item in that place, like undo or something.
This is the combination of swipe and undo. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a little second. I'll get to that. No, sorry. Next one I was going to talk about is Bezel Swipe. So a lot of you have probably used the view pager components, which is pretty powerful, right, for making these nicely horizontal paging views. But many people don't actually realize it has this Bezel Swipe built into it. So what that means is that you can put content inside a view pager which is actually horizontally panable itself. Say you wanted to put a map or a web page into a view pager. It might not be immediately obvious that you would be able to kind of use like a horizontal gesture because it's kind of reserved for the view. But view pager automatically looks for touches which are within a kind of a certain gutter of the edges, and will let you do this horizontal, like a bezel swipe, to move it along. If you're implementing it in your code, you need to make sure your views are returning. There's a callback they have to implement called like can scroll horizontally. It has to make sure it's implementing that properly in order to tell ViewPager when to page and when to kind of use the touches itself. But it can be really, really powerful. The next pattern is something we're kind of like dubbing quick return. So let's see if I can demo that. So you can see on the beamer over there. So this is a really cool pattern for if you kind of constrained in the amount of UI you have to use on the screen, but you want something to be easily accessible at all times. This is a cool pattern that can help with that problem here. So in here we said this white block here. So we have this scroll view. So as I'm scrolling, as you can see, as I'm scrolling, this white view will go out of view, and I can keep on scrolling, keep on scrolling. But as soon as I start to scroll back, that white view will peek back in until it's fully in view, until it I keep on scrolling until it regains its natural position. You see that? This is a really cool pattern that Google Now uses quite effectively. So here you can see if I go into Google Now, and I can go and see these beautiful cards. it says that screen real estate is kind of limited. It's not going to make this search bar persistent, but the search bar is really, really important that it wants you to have easy access to get back to it very, very quickly. So it lets you scroll it off the page, but as soon as you kind of start scrolling back in, it'll jump back in and it'll hover there until it regains its natural place in the hierarchy. So I think this is like a super awesome pattern that you can really, really kind of like make powerful layouts. So we open sourced it in some code here. And the next one I was going to talk about is something called sticky blocks, which is just here. So this is, again, where you have a piece of information in your view hierarchy, which is really, really important that the user has quick access to it. But you don't want it to kind of be persistent the whole time. So here, we've got this block here, which we, in the white, which we said it would call is really important. So as I scroll my UI, as it reaches the top, it just kind of snaps and stays there until I kind of scroll back down and it regains its natural position. So this kind of is the kind of pattern which the Play Store uses, for example, where it says you've got a buy button on your app. It's really important that it lets you, see this whole listing, and we want the buy button to be in line somewhere in the application. But we don't want the user to be able to kind of like scroll it away. We want them to have easy access at any one time to hit that button. So as you start scrolling, it'll snap at the top and it won't kind of go away. And then as you scroll back down, it'll resume its natural place in the hierarchy. So this kind of sticky blocks pattern, as we're calling it, is kind of really, really powerful. And think about how you might use that in your applications. Next one is we're calling it a done and discard pattern. So this is kind of like a variation or a version of the action bar, which I think is really, really powerful. This is introducing ice cream sandwiches in the people application, where if you're editing a person or creating a calendar entry, it transforms the entire action bar into this done and discard bar. I think it's awesome because it's kind of true to the action bar in that it's occupying the same visual space but just applying a different visual treatment to it. But it's just completely unambiguous about what the actions are going to do. Because a lot of people might get confused, like if I hit the back button, what's going to happen, or do I have to explicitly save? Whereas if you use this incredibly clear pattern, there's no confusion about what's going to happen here. So it's really, really easy to show. And the next one is the undo bars. This is what you were talking about here. So we have a whole page on our design site about when to prompt for confirmation, or ask for users to confirm if you're going to delete something. Like it's quite kind of, it can slow you down quite a lot if you have to kind of confirm everything. You have these like modal dialogues popping up. It's quite laborious for the user to have to go through that. What's even more powerful is if you can let the user kind of complete an operation and then use a programmatic undo to let them, oh no, I didn't mean to do that, hit the undo bar. So Gmail, for example, does this really, really nicely. Rather than prompting every time you want to delete a message, that could get really, really tiresome, right? So instead of that, it just lets you do it very quickly, and if you've done it by accident, it just pops this undo bar. So I think this works really, really well in conjunction with the swipe to dismiss. So the code we open source doesn't do this, but you could easily justify it. You could easily change it. So on completion, instead of just animating close, you will just pop in a layout as such. And then you can open source it.
What about this thing that the same place where the swipe was swipe
Mm-hmm.
undo,
Yeah, let me demonstrate what you're talking about, actually. It'll be easier. So he's talking about combining the swipe to dismiss with the undo pattern, which is what the new Gmail application does. So this is my own Gmail. So you see here, if I want, I can swipe away a message, and it's replaced it with this kind of like confirmation part saying archive and undo, and I can easily hit the undo button to bring it back. So I think this is a really, really awesome pattern because it kind of stays in the same place. You're not having to have this kind of like toast type overlay. I think it works really, really well. I'm just going to close my email. Is that cool? To answer your question?
Yes.
Cool, awesome. And the last of the kind of like patterns, open source building blocks I want to talk about is this wizard dialog, again from Roman. He's open sourced some really, really awesome code for like when you have multi-step activities. Like I was saying earlier, it's really, really painful to have long forms of data you have to fill in. So it's much nicer if you can like break it up into kind of like easy to digest chunks. So he's created an engine which works really, really nicely for like doing like step through wizards. So here you can kind of like page through all the different steps or offer you to confirm before the end. So think about how you might break up long kind of data entry, especially if there's any kind of branches which are dependent on each other. Then you can break it up into this kind of wizard, which is actually a lot easier to use and has great user experience in it. So like I said, those are some emerging UI patterns, which I urge you to think about how you might use them in your applications, because they're gaining traction, so users will be familiar with them, and they'll kind of like look out for them and know how to use them. What's better is that they're all kind of open source, so they're all available either like the Bezel Swipe is just in the platform in the view pager. There's the one that Jake did, and the rest of them, Roman has put in a Google Code project, so you can just download these and adapt them for your own needs. So if you enjoy kind of like learning about these kind of new patterns as well, I'm going to do a little plug for our new show we're doing on YouTube. So every Tuesday at 4:30 Central European Time, Roman Urich, Adam Kosh and I are doing a YouTube show called Android Design in Action, where we spend just 30 minutes, half an hour, talking about Android design. And we don't just talk about it, we actually demonstrate it as well. So we're taking existing applications out there, which might be a little bit old, might need a bit of an update, and reimagining them, what they could look like if they applied the Android design principles to them. So you get this kind of like makeover, you get this kind of like before and after effect. And we use that to demonstrate some of these patterns and principles and design techniques, which it's one thing to see it in a design guideline, it's really useful to see them actually applied. And you think, hey, I could do that in my application. So here's an app I redesigned. It used just to be like a plain screen with a grey log-on button. So I took those principles of having content come out to the fore and using like kind of like designing for scaling to redesign it to that one. So yeah, I encourage you to watch along, either live or they're all on YouTube. So if you follow this link there, /Android Design in Action, that'll take you to our YouTube playlist, so you can catch up after the fact as well. And there's this emerging community of people talking about Android design mostly on Google Plus as well. So if you follow the hashtags #ADIA for Android Design in Action or #Android Design, then there's lots and lots of people talking about Android design. If you have questions about how to design for Android, you can address them to this hashtag, and people are talking about these kind of things. You can mention me on Google Plus, and I'll kind of help you out with these kind of problems. And right now, we're actually holding a contest with the Android Design in Action show, where in last week's show on Tuesday, we said if anyone does a redesign, can they share it on Google Plus? Redesign of an existing app, share it on Google Plus with this hashtag, and the best 10 we're going to give away a prize, some UI stencils too. And I've been overwhelmed with the response. Like, it's been fantastic. The number of incredible redesigns which are out there are amazing. So if you want some inspiration, if you want to get some best practice on what people are doing in the Android design space, then I encourage you to jump to these hashtags. And as I said, this presentation is online, so you can grab it at /creating modern Android UIs. And that's it from me, but I think we have 10 minutes for questions, so thank you very much. Oh yeah, and I've got some prizes. Let's see if we can do a rich American football throw to the back if there's any good questions. Who's got questions? Let's go to the front first. Yep, very common question. So what's the difference between the back button and the up button? Right, so the best answer is to watch the talk from Google I/O. There's a Google I/O talk called Navigation, which goes into this in some depth. But in summary, the up button is hierarchical and the back button is temporal. So the way I like to think about it is with an example. So for example, if you came from a home screen widget into like a deep section of your application hierarchy, like hitting back would take you back to like the home screen where you came from, whereas hitting up would take you to its logical parent. So it gives you these kind of different routes. So up is all, the up one on the action bar is always like, what is the logical parent of this screen? It should always take you there. And the things that Rich mentioned this morning, using the activity parent flag and the compatibility version of the support library, help you to build that, whereas back will take you back where you came from. That makes sense. Cool. Hey.
I wonder if all of these design features are actually present in the back compatibility library, so we can use them on older versions of Android.
Which features are you talking about?
Like the action bars and the Holo Themes, because I don't think the Holo Themes are there, right?
No, that's a good question. Okay, so pretty much everything from Ice Cream Sandwich is available in compatibility package other than the action bar. And for that, Action Bar Sherlock, I highly recommend as a backport. At Google I/O, we announced we were creating our own version, which hasn't launched yet. So once that does, then take a look at that. But until then, Action Bar Sherlock is fantastic, and it also provides a backport of the Holo styles. There's also a project called Holo Everywhere, which is backporting a lot of the styles if you don't want to use Action Bar Sherlock and so on. So you can kind of use all of these styles in a backwards compatible manner, back to like 1.7, I think. Or
And also, like some of the other widgets, like the calendar widgets that are present in Android 4.0, I think, and higher, are they going to be in some kind of library too? Because
I can't comment, like, are they going to be? I can't, like, you know, it's not my team that writes them, so I can't really just, like, commit another team to doing that or anything like that. But my gut feeling is no. Like, I think the compatibility library is more for functionality, which is for all versions. So things like the view pager is only in the compatibility library, right? It's written there and it's available to everyone. I don't think the team wants to be backporting every single piece of functionality. I think we've made some exceptions for things like fragments and loaders, which is so fundamental to the way you write your application that it's super important they're available to everyone. But I don't think our aim is to kind of, you'd end up shipping the whole of the system UI in each application if you embed the support library. I think the right way to go about these things is to backport what makes sense to get the kind of the structure and the framework and the look and feel, but then to use progressive enhancement so that like the time pick, number picker, I think you mentioned, was greatly improved in Android 4.0. So I think it's fine to show the old style one on Gingerbread and then just take advantage of the new one where it's available. Or things like switches, to use like maybe a radio button on an older phone and then use like a switch component on the newer phone. I think like progressive enhancement is the right answer there, rather than trying to backport every single component.
all right, thank you.
Cool. Hey.
Message fragment. Is this a feature we can expect in future Android releases?
Which one?
Message fragment. The ability to put one fragment inside another.
I'm not going to be able to announce new features here, unfortunately, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Hey. Hi, would you say that site navigation is kind of emerging pattern? Site navigation like Google Plus app uses or Facebook app uses. So would you recommend to use this kind of navigation?
Yeah, we call it the sliding drawer pattern. It's documented on the Action Bar Design Pattern site. I think it's really, really good when you have a list, quite a long list, when it's kind of too big for like spinner navigation, for example. But I would say be careful about implementing it, because I think there's quite a few vying implementations out there, and I'd like to see it consolidate down. So I think the best example, the one most in line with our kind of UX team's thinking, is YouTube. So the main thing I'd say is don't monkey with the action bar. Like I say, the action bar is such an important visual element that you want to keep that anchor there and have the fly-in come in kind of underneath it rather than moving the whole screen. So yeah, I think you're right, it's a very important navigation pattern. I don't think it's going to replace everything, but I think it's got a good place when there's lots of stuff and lots of options.
I think there is a little problem that users, it's kind of hard for them to discover this navigation.
Why is that?
I don't know, it's just not visible, so...
So my answer would be to use the up caret. So if you think about it, like it's like the root of your application, right? So this is like all your navigation options, and then you have the top level things after that. So it makes sense to use up to kind of like to show that, even if it's not like an up kind of like transition. It's the root of your kind of above the level you're on the hierarchy. So I think that makes sense to use the up caret and to only have it available at the top levels of your hierarchy as well. So when you're in subsequent levels, hitting up takes you back to the top level and then up again to reveal.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a note about permissions when you were talking about input and keyboard, that we should request for passwords and emails from an account manager and ask for these permissions in our app. But I have the only way how for a user how to discover a false app or a harmful app is by these permissions. And if I ask the user and won't be able to tell him exactly why I asked him for these permissions, that he will be really suspicious about my app.
I think it's a fair point. I think users are keen on permissions and they do read it. I think you can use your description text, so you can explain, I need the get accounts permission to offer you email addresses. You can do this in the description, and certainly if you add a new permission, then you should definitely always say why in the what's new text of your listing. But like I say, it does cost you a permission, but in my opinion, it's worth it for the ease of using your app.
One more. What do you think is the best way to make brands, different brands of your application for different customers?
Different brands? So we have like a white label solution and you want to have
for example, different images, different colors of your application, so to change themes.
Yeah.
To keep your source code.
Yeah, so the only really good way to do that is like with library projects, really. So you have the core of your functionality in one library project, and then you have different implementations with the theming, which pull in the functionality. Cool.
I would like, I have one suggestion for Android design in action. I would like to see their Google Plus application, because from my point of view, there is not, there are some opportunities for improvement. What is your opinion?
Yeah, I agree that there's a few things I'd like to see it change, like I was saying with the action bar and the sliding draw pattern. I don't think it's taken quite the right thing.
Especially there is the green bar below the action bar, which is weird for me. It's for adding comments, adding places, and adding pictures. I don't understand why it's there.
It's doing that quick return pattern that I was talking about earlier, but I think the implementation is not quite. Not quite there.
Thank you.
Yeah, but thanks for the suggestion. We're trying to get people to opt in to design in action before we redesign them, rather than just doing it out of the dark. So maybe I'll ask the G+ team. Hey, which one?
Hello. I have a question about dialogues. Why is order of positive button or negative button switched from gingerbread to ice cream sandwich?
So that was a decision made by the AUX, the Android UX team, based on UX research. I think most people are right-handed and they wanted the positive option nearest to their thumb.
Yes, but a lot of users of older Androids was familiar with this order, and now is opposite, and when I want some confirmation, I deny it. And
yeah, as developers, we probably get it worse because we jump around between different versions and testing devices, and so it's hard. But for users, like, it takes a day or two to kind of remap your brain in a way, and then they get used to it. So I'd say, yes, it's a change. Yes, change is hard, but like once you're over the change, it's not so bad. And I actually think it's better in the long run. So we got time for more? Or? Oh, time's up. So, okay, I'm out of time, but I am still around. I also have a Nexus 4 and 10 if anyone wants to play with it. So come find me outside afterwards. Oh yeah, I completely forgot. You asked 15 questions, so you can have one of these. Who had a good question? That was a good question, I like that one. Oh, sorry, there. And for the cheek of telling me to redesign the G+ app, you can have one as well. So, yeah, thanks very much.